What's up, everybody? I'm Noah Krachivik, joined by my friend and colleague Carlos Garrido, and welcome to another live stream from the Midwestern Marxist Institute for Marxist Theory and Political Analysis. We got a really good stream lined up for you guys tonight. Some very important kind of stuff to talk about. But before we get to any of that, please remember that we are a completely people-funded institute. Everything in our budget comes from you guys, and we are remonetized. So if any of you guys have super chats or anything like that, you're free to send them again. How you doing, Carlos?
Doing good, brother. It's been a very impactful week in politics. We had friend of the Institute, Gray Zone journalist, superb journalist Wyatt Reed, be the subject of a horrendous hit piece by the Bezos-owned Washington Post. We also had a friend of the Institute, Scott Ritter, tremendous geopolitical analyst and military strategist, detained and had his passport confiscated alongside Judge Napolitano, I believe that is his last name, who were heading to Russia for the St. Petersburg Economic Forum to speak in a panel with good friend of the Institute, Jackson Hinkle. And we also had a few other strange things happen this week, a series of coordinated and somewhat coincidental, although we know nothing's coincidental, attacks on leading Institute figures at a very interesting conjuncture. We also have, of course, this weekend, the upcoming CPUSA convention, of which our discussion today, the first part of it, will be focused on, specifically a very interesting resolution that we wish to break down and frankly debunk. So we'll start with all of that after we play, as we always do, the glorious International.
Welcome back, everybody.
Starting off strong here with Leon Trotsky in the 21st century, giving us a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, brother.
I refer to him as the best trot.
The best trot
in my head.
I actually had the opportunity recently, as I mentioned last stream I did. I was 3 hours out from the plane landing in the US, but I spent about a week in Mexico and a series of conferences about the Marxist position on law, the Marxist position on the state, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the passing of the great Vladimir Lenin. And I got to kick it with a series of diverse tendencies of Latin American Marxists. It was very strange listening to people who were a part of the Trotskyite movement, have some affinities with Leon Trotsky, but in terms of their analysis are just on par with ours, especially in terms of geopolitics. It's this very interesting phenomenon exhibited by people like Michael Hudson or good friends of the Institute, Radhika Desai or Alan Freeman, that they might come from a position of Trotskyism on some things, but the Trots themselves will do the job of calling them Stalinist. And I would much prefer to have a Trot like that than a Stalinist that is just a complete cuck to the establishment's positions on Russia, on Palestine, on whatever else may be. And we all know a party or two that claims a very strong allegiance to Stalin, claims to be very strong within the anti-revisionist camp, which is usually code word for dogmatism in some of these spaces. But with on the central geopolitical issues of our day, fall right in line with the liberal wings of empire, while giving it a very radical veneer. So I much prefer a good Trot to one of these fake Stalinists.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's funny how there's always some revolutionary sounding way that people just end up saying the exact same thing as the institutions of the ruling class. Like you can't dress up bourgeois theory and call it Stalinist and actually expect people to take you seriously. All they do in that point is say, "Oh, this Stalinism is BS." Right? That's all that happens. And our era really is, it's sort of the era of necessity, right? This sort of deterioration of living conditions, reproletarianization, the ongoing slaughter of the Palestinian people, all of these and everything else around the world, all of these things are adding up to a point where no matter where someone comes from, if they're real and genuine about needing a way out of the crises, then they're on the right side. It doesn't matter if they've come out of Trotskyism or Stalinism like we do or anything else. What matters is that they are materially aligned against the ruling class.
And in the spirit of materially being aligned against the ruling class, thank you so much, Maximilian Valoshek, for the $5 super chat. I see a gorilla and I see a sun there. Those are iconic signs of the anti-imperialist American communist movement. Thank you so much for that, brother. No, I couldn't agree with you anymore, Noah. Do we want to get started breaking down Resolution 5 of the upcoming CPUSA convention? I think it's an important item of discussion. And again, we're not here to tell people how to vote. We're here to analyze a resolution from a party that enunciates itself as being Marxist-Leninist, as being guided by democratic centralism and the principles of Marxism-Leninism. And as an institute, a Marxist-Leninist think tank, it is our job to analyze these and see if they measure up to our scrutiny, see if they're actually substantiated by proper Marxist-Leninist analysis, or whether they're contaminated by the eclecticism one often finds nowadays under the label Marxism-Leninism, which is usually a hybrid mix of liberal theories from the academy, wokeism, and other things used to, again, present a radical veneer on a fundamentally establishment form of politics.
Yeah, I always go back to one of the founding documents of Marxism-Leninism, Foundations of Leninism by Stalin, right? The section on method begins with a sort of very brief explanation of how the Second International got to be so reactionary during the period of the relatively peaceful development of capitalism, right? This sort of cements the leaders of the Second International, who in the period prior to the Bolsheviks rising were considered the leading luminaries, the Marxists, right? Like if you wanted to know the Marxist position on something, you went to Kautsky. But what happens, right? That leads them to this like comfortable middle classification, where they end up mouthing Marxist language, saying Marxist words, almost obligatory like, and the real content of what they're saying was in support of the ruling class. Real quick before we get started on this in our era, though, HMT asks if Eddie will be joining us. He's actually locked up in my basement right now. I don't know if you remember, like when I first joined the institute, Carlos and I were very jealous of just how great Eddie is and how much everyone loves him. So we sort of had to do something about it, and that was our solution. I let him out from time to time. Who knows? Maybe he'll get out now. He's a big muscular dude, but yeah, that's where he is now. Just so you guys are aware.
That was all factual.
Mm.
Noah, do you want to pull up the document itself? I think we could read it piece by piece, specifically the fifth resolution, which is my view, the most important one.
Yeah,
and discuss it.
Real quick before we get to it, the whole thing, right? You can tell the writing is very sort of corporate, it's I don't know, the style of it is very troubling. It's very wokist, very, HR department. It reads like an HR department memo, basically. But I think this part in particular is the most troubling of the entire group of resolutions they have. But yeah, go ahead, Carlos. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, you didn't. I was just asking for you to pull it up because I can't.
Oh,
You're gonna have to read it for us because I can't, or zoom into it a bit.
I don't know if I can. Let's see. But we should go through it word by word anyway.
You should zoom in so that the public can also read it on their own.
Yeah, I don't know how to zoom in. I'm very stupid and old.
Well, just send me the link and I'll pull it up myself.
All right, that'll work. You're smarter than I am, after all. There we go. We'll send the link to Carlos and he can do it because he's better than me.
Shut up.
Here, I'll stop sharing my screen. There you go. It's Article 5 or Resolution 5 or whatever. Like, even the way they present things like the housing question is very bourgeois and liberal and not really talking about what actually creates things, what creates the housing crisis, the real estate cartels, etc. It's just sort of like, like our sense of eternal justice has been infringed upon. Please, Proudhon, give us the answer, kind of thing.
Is this visible for the audience?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Well, let's go through this piece by piece. This is the resolution on the 2024 elections. It starts by saying, whereas the 2024 elections at the federal, state, and local levels represent a pivotal juncture, a moment of crisis. That is itself true. We are at a turning point or a nodal point in history. There is a moment of crisis in our hands. I have even ventured to call it a integral crisis because of the multi-layered dimensions of the crisis that we face in our country. They're not reducible to just an economic crisis or a crisis of overproduction and underconsumption, as the old Marxist theory used to hold. We have in front of us a crisis of legitimacy. The general public does not buy into the dominant institutions of ideological hegemony. We're faced with other forms of crisis, such as mental health crisis, and a crisis of empire, which cannot at all be disconnected from the integral state of the U.S. Those people who would like to divorce foreign policy from national policy are lunatics operating under a metaphysical, non-dialectical way of looking at things. Foreign policy is intimately tied to national policy, especially when you live within the belly of the beast, the country whose foreign policy is in many ways the heart and soul of the state. So we're looking at a myriad, a wide array of different forms of crisis at different levels, experienced objectively, experienced subjectively. I would say that in terms of the subjective factor needed to promote and produce a social revolution, we're also experiencing a subjective crisis in that sphere as well. There's a dearth and absence of socialist, genuine communist organizations with a correct worldview, with their Marxism right to produce the desired outcomes that can be produced in periods of objective revolutionary crisis, where objective revolutionary conditions are present. So this first sentence is right. Now let's see where they take it. The crisis we face features the threat of fascism, which is absolutely right. We'll see just how right it is. I don't think it understands the dimensions of how right or how broad the threat of fascism is. Bellicose militarism, brutal racism, military assaults on immigrant workers, anti-human attacks on women, people of color, and LGBTQ people, and an unrelenting war on workers, and especially their unions. So I would like to break this down, but go ahead first, Noah.
Yeah, the first thing that sticks out at me is the lack of a Marxist point of view for all of these things they mentioned. An unrelenting war on workers is the sort of rule, as if all people of color, gay people, whatever, aren't workers, as if the struggle against capital isn't a sort of multifaceted class struggle. What this says to me is that they're viewing things through intersectionalism, right? Bourgeois theory that tries to understand these problems, but gets it wrong because it's not a material theory. It sort of metaphysically divorces all of these aspects of people rather than seeing sort of historically determined forms of class struggle. It lumps, all gay people under a multi-class banner and says they all have the same interests despite their class, but they don't, right? Bourgeois gay people are not the same as bourgeois working class people, right? But yeah, go ahead, Carlos.
No, I couldn't agree more. This has been a central framework of our institute's analysis of the crisis of the U.S. and Western left in general. There is no Marxism substantiating their judgments on various events unfolding in the world. That means there's a crisis of outlook. And if there's no Marxism, if the dialectical materialist worldview is not what is animating their analysis of the world, then something else is. And when we've called that something else, the positive form that the absence of dialectical materialism takes, is the purity fetish, a very undialectical way of looking at things. And this is evident here in the threat of fascism. There is indeed a threat of fascism, but let's step back and analyze what is fascism, because what we find in the dominant narratives coming from the bourgeoisie is a myriad of different perspectives on fascism that all share in common a few factors. One of them is that fascism is this thing that comes out of nowhere. You have these very sensationalist dramas and shows and movies about Hitlerism or Mussolini, but more specifically Nazism, Hitlerism. And it presents it as this thing that came out of nowhere, as this thing that comes into being in a way that's fundamentally antagonistic to the nice liberal democratic bourgeois order. That's one of the narratives. Another narrative is the one that's promoted by the Western Marxists, which reduces it to a problem of personalities. Here we have the archetype of Adorno and others from the Western Marxist camp, the Frankfurt School, who view fascism as a problem of personality. It's really the individual dispositions that people hold on the basis of whatever experiences they had as children that makes them predisposed to either respect authority, i.e. Be fascist, or disrespect authority, which we would call some very, depending on context, a very anarchistic, don't tell me what to do, dad spirit. None of these or a correct understanding of fascism. These are all rooted in a very idealist and disconnected logic that doesn't understand the soil out of which fascism arises, that seeks to make fascism as much of a foreign, external, alienated entity as possible. The reality is that it is the capitalist mode of production that produces fascism. Because fascism is nothing more than a form of governance that the capitalist state necessitates in various moments, specifically moments when capitalism comes into periods of crisis. This is when we see the historic rise of fascism. It is in moments of crisis when, as Dimitrov said, the leading parts of capitalism, of the capitalist class, meaning the finance capitalist class, exerts over the population the most open and terroristic dictatorship of capital. And it does this for various reasons. Sometimes it does it to stabilize the rates of profits. Sometimes it does it specifically to roll back the potential for socialism that is also present in moments of crisis. It does it for a wide variety of reasons, but in general, it's a form of governance that the capitalist state takes in periods of crisis in order to stabilize the mode of life and fight back against that other force which is operative in moments of crisis, which is the working class, popular, marginalized, oppressed groups that are also struggling for socialism in a new form of life. In the US and in the West in general, what we've seen ever since the 1970s, which of course is the juncture for a very deep crisis of capital, is that neoliberalism has been able to accomplish many of the aims that fascism was made operative for, again, as a form of governance. What we find in the neoliberal stage of capitalism, or the neo-imperialist, as some have called it, like Cheng and Fu, is the acronym that I've been using for many years, thanks to the professor I had in undergrad who was a communist, is PLAID. We have is outright privatization, so public property made private. You have liberalization, so the opening up of markets, specifically in the global south, so that Western multinationals can come in and loot. Austerity for the people, the rolling back of social programs, welfare programs, and anything that provided any sense of security and material comfort for working people, and specifically in the global south, and deregulation. So removing the regulations that were imposed on capital so that things like the environment and working class communities can be safe, or just the workday in general, right? A good example of this is the train derailment in East Palestine that produced untold effects in terms of the environment and the health of nearby American people. That's a product of specifically deregulation, and that's something that the rail unions have been complaining about for decades. So what we have seen with the period of neoliberalism is that it's been able to, in essence, achieve what the fascist form of governance was used for in the period. So any analysis of fascism has to take this specifically into account. Now, this is intensified in recent periods when both parts of the ruling class have waged, under the auspices of the war on terror, criminal genocidal wars in the Middle East that have literally brought the deaths of dozens of millions of people and the displacement of dozens of millions of people. And it culminates in what we've been seeing since October 7th in Palestine, which is an outright genocide. More than 40,000 people slaughtered, women and children. The images we have seen over the last 8 months have been horrific. They've been stomach turning. And folks, there's nothing more fascist, there's nothing more Nazi-like than a genocide, and the one that we're seeing waged and supported and funded and equipped by our government, by a democratic administration, by Genocide Joe. There's also nothing more fascist than carrying forth the proxy war that we've been waging for a very long time against Russia, which overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014 and put it on the path of slaughtering the ethnically Russian people in the Donbass. More than 15,000 of them were killed before the start of Russia's special military operation, which is an operation that the most progressive forces in the region, including the Communist Party of Ukraine and the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, had been basically begging the Russian government, United Russia and Putin, to take ever since 2014, because they understood it for what it was. It's Western imperialist encroachment onto Russia, the promotion of banderism, which is Nazism with Ukrainian characteristics, which had been developing ever since the overthrow of the Soviet Union, where the diaspora, the banderist diaspora, goes back and completely begins a process of brainwashing the Ukrainian people, specifically in the West, and rewriting history as told from the perspective of the nationalist, banderist Nazi forces. So when you're sending hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars to Nazis in Ukraine, when you're sending hundreds of billions of dollars to the Nazi state of Israel to carry forth a genocide, and when this is the norm for the imperialist system, the policies that are taken, irrespective of what administration is in power, because they're the policies that represent the deep state, the American imperialist state, don't come talking to me about a fascist threat that is reducible to the Republicans' Project 2025 or to the MAGA phenomenon or to Donald Trump. That is utter bullshit. The fascist threat is here, but the fascism that we're experiencing is one that is in both parties. It is a fascism that more specifically over the last few years has been evident in the Democratic Party, which is waging a war that has killed hundreds of thousands of people needlessly in Ukraine and has killed currently more than 40,000 people through conservative estimates, because who knows how many people are still under the rubble in Palestine. So that's and has continued rolling back the gains that working people have made. It would be foolish of us to see the rise in labor militancy as a result of the Democratic administration and not the natural product of working people organizing at a moment where there is a genuine crisis of legitimacy at hand.
Yeah. I mean, look, well, to sum all that up, right? Fascism is capitalism going to extremes to defend the status quo, right? The most reactionary segment of capital at a given time is that one that can effectively do that, right? A lot of the sort of definition mongering of liberalism, sort of pretending it's Marxism, gets us confused because they make a static, in stone definition of what Dimitrov says about the most reactionary elements of finance capital. But the problem is this changes form depending on what the conditions on the ground are, right? So they can't really understand what reaction is at a given time. They almost it leads them into this very murky, vague area where anything that is metaphysically considered conservative becomes far right, becomes fascist, becomes part of the fascist threat, right? But here's the thing. When we're talking about preservation of the status quo at any costs, we must talk about not just the Republicans, not just the Democrats, not the Republicans and Democrats, but the relationship between the Republicans and the Democrats. If all you're doing is subsuming yourself to one side of that fight, you are actually making yourself part of the threat of fascism, which is a real threat. We should be really sort of straightforward about that. We're entering a period of deep, impossible to get over crises of capitalism. Financialization and globalization have sort of reached this point where it can't go on in the old way. That's what causes reproletarianization. That's what causes our living standards to drop, right? They're no longer able to get other countries all over the world to trade in the dollar and make sure their deficit is paid for with treasury bond scams, etc., right? That can't happen. So what happens? Our conditions begin deteriorating. Our people begin seeing that actually the people to blame aren't people over there or over there. They're people up there, right? And those people are in both the Republican and the Democratic Party. If we sort of just choose a side between those, we end up going on that hamster wheel that is the status quo, right? And like Carlos says, there is nothing more fascist than a genocide. That relationship has led to the funding of a genocide through the power of the military industrial complex, right? To the organization of a genocide, to the funding of actual neo-Nazis. We are in a place where people who call themselves communists are okay, and as we'll go through the rest of this, we're only on the first paragraph, are okay not just saying this is cool, right? This bourgeois, always been bourgeois political organization allying to open neo-Nazis. Not just saying that's okay, but outright campaigning for them, spending all of the rank and file's time, energy, and money on them, and making everything subsumed by the back and forth bourgeois hamster wheel of Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. Everyone in America is sick of that paradigm. The working class is sick of it. There's a reason that the government has such an abysmally low approval rating, right? Because people can tell that that is where the problem is. So when all we do is say, yep, bourgeois politics, that's the way to go, we're just telling them, well, screw you, working class. We like these liberals. We think these liberals will actually be a little bit nicer in their fascism, which is absolute bullshit. There is nothing in that true. There is nothing in that coming from a materialist perspective. And you can whine and give me all the dogmas you want about how, oh, like being anti-Democrats is actually the ultra left. But all you're doing when you say that is saying you don't understand what ultra leftism is.
Sorry. Thank you very much to the comrade from Canada, Terry Murdoch, one of the solid blue collar workers in our community, someone who will play a very important role in the future of the northern part of our Western hemisphere. But I couldn't agree more with what you said, Noah. And if we understand this dialectic of fascist governance essential for capitalist political economy, where does it leave a party that says we have to intervene in it for one side, specifically a side that's explicitly waging a genocide? I'm sorry, folks, but I do not think the best way to fight a fascist threat is by supporting a party that is backed up by the national security state. And we have to remember what Michael Parenti said. He said, I quote, "In America besieged, the fascist threat comes not from the Christian right or the militias or this or that grouplet of skinheads, but from the national security state itself, the police state within the state, what many people would today call the deep state." That aspect of the state that functions outside of democratic accountability is fully behind establishment Democrats. It's fully behind establishment Republicans. And it's the state that's carrying forth a genocide right now. So don't tell me that there's a fascist threat and that in order to defeat it, we have to support the candidate sending more than $100 billion to literal neo-Nazis in Ukraine, people with swastikas and SS and Hitler tattoos. That's how we fight fascism, by sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Nazis. There was a study that just came out that the average age of our bridges are like 60 something years old, and it would take $40 billion to fix. So you're telling me we can't fix our bridges that are crumbling all across the country, but we can send more than twice as much of the money that it would take to fix all of the bridges in the country to neo-Nazis, to wage a unwinnable war where there's just hundreds of thousands of innocent people who don't want to be conscripted into the Ukrainian army getting thrown into the meat grinder for literally no reason other than waging an unwinnable war against Russia because it benefits US imperial interest. You're telling me that to fight the fascist threat, we have to support a literal ethno-state that has been keeping people in a concentration camp in Gaza, that has it's a literal apartheid state, a state that is tried at the ICJ for committing a Holocaust, a genocide, a state whose president is currently guilty by the ICC. That he's in such a condition that if he goes to France and Germany, he'll literally get arrested. But he's coming now to speak to the American Congress. You're telling me that a state waging a genocide, killing babies, murdering babies, you're telling me that that state is the one we have to support to fight off a fascist threat? How stupid do you think I am? How stupid do you think the people in your party, the rank and file, are? How stupid do you think the members of the Communist Party are that they will believe your nonsense when you say that to fight the fascist threat, we have to support the most fascistic fucking forces in the universe, in the planet right now? There's no one more fascist than the current administration carrying forth a fucking genocide and a proxy war, killing hundreds of thousands of people needlessly, funding in the process the vanguard of the Ukrainian forces, which are literal Nazis. No one is more fascist than that. And if you think the members of the glorious Communist Party are stupid enough to believe you that you have to vote Democrat, which is effectively what Resolution 5 is. Resolution 5 is, let's continue licking the boots of the Democrats. That's what it means. Don't get it twisted. It's let's vote Democrats unconditionally. Unconditional support for Democrats. That's what Resolution 5 is. If you think the members of the glorious Communist Party, the people who got politically mobilized because they see in front of them a futureless future, if you think that these people are stupid enough to follow you through in supporting the Democratic Party, the party that is the vanguard for fascism today, under the auspices of fighting fascism and the fascist threat, you must be incredibly stupid or delusional. I got a bridge to sell you if that's how you view the world.
Absolutely. And here's the thing: where do they think the next part? Like, let's go on from this real quick. The next part is, whereas the MAGA forces, whatever the MAGA forces are, right, have put forward a dangerous fascist agenda, as if genocide isn't a fascist agenda, outlined in their 2025 project that seeks to cut support for public institutions, Social Security, SNAP, public education, healthcare, union rights, blah, 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 right? Defeating Trump alone is not enough, they say, right? So basically, we need to make sure Democrats get in office instead of Republicans, no matter what. And where does the money for this genocide come from, right? Let's forget for a moment the fact that nationalized things in a bourgeois system are still bourgeois sort of solutions, right? That our public education, for instance, is funded by our tax dollars, and that's why if you live in a poor area, you have poorly funded schools because your schools are funded by your property taxes, right? It's all made to get extraction from us to them. But let's put all that aside. The wars that they're funding right now, filtering money through the military industrial complex, right? Making them billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, giving them more money, which equals more power in our government. We shouldn't even say over our government because it is our government, right? All of that money could easily fund every single issue here and more, right? Could fund every single thing every wildest dream of every reformist, right? It could fund all of them. But it doesn't. And they've been saying this for decades. And this is what I was talking about, the hamster wheel. If they can get half of us to say, well, we have to stop these other guys because of this, and then the other half to say, no, we need to stop these guys because of that, and it just goes around and around and around and around. You can look at every speech Sam Webb, the liquidator, ever made, and it sounds like this. Every single one sounds like this. Look at the convention speeches from when he was in charge of the party and trying to liquidate it, and now, goes into the Democrats or whatever he's doing now. It's this. This is what it is. We were supposed to have a solution to that liquidationism. Where's that solution? That solution is you guys. Sorry.
No, you couldn't be any more right, Noah. And the tragedy is that this country needs nothing more than a communist party. And this is the historic communist party, the glorious party erected in 1919 with a history as beautiful as any other glorious party in the world. And it's being completely tarnished by people who should just be honest with themselves and join the Democrats or join DSA. Why can't you just join DSA and let the Communist Party be an actual communist party? Let it not be anymore a party of supporting the left wing of capital. Let it be an actual people's party, which is what this country desperately needs. We're not going to hate you. We only dislike you because of what you're doing in the name of communism. If you were at least honest and went to the Democrats or DSA, there would be correspondence between what you say you are and what you objectively are. What we hate is the gap that exists between what you say you are, you say you're communist, you say you're leading faithfully a communist party, but in reality, you're just a Democrat. You're just a Democrat. Just join the Kyle Kalinske faction of the Democrats, and that's it. Be what you are. We're not going to shame you for it. Be honest. Leave the party to the people that actually want to build an alternative to the dictatorship of capital that's destroying our lives, that has stripped us of any sense of sovereignty, and that occupies us and miserates us and deads us and keeps us desperate.
Damn
Leave
straight,
the party
brother.
to us. That's it. Leave the party to the people that are serious, to the cadres within the party that are serious about communism, that got politicized in a turbulent moment where the forces of history are changing and entering into a new form of life globally. Leave the party to the people that can use it as an instrument to fulfill its historic role. Right now, you're just an obstacle. You're an obstacle to the movement of history, and it's criminal, the role that you're playing as an obstacle.
And I wonder about people who have been around people like Gus Hall, William Z. Foster, etc., and how they talked versus how this is presented to us. All this is presenting to us is no matter what, we need to make sure Democrats win. That's very, very suspicious to me. But William Z. Foster said it best, right? He said, just as the Nazis or the party of finance capital, in America, the Democrats and Republicans are the party of finance capital. He didn't qualify that and say there was a fascist threat from one of them. He said it was both, because it is. They are bourgeois institutions, right? I don't understand how people can actually call themselves communists, and then when you actually whittle down into what they say and the real world implications of them, they're just liberals. Like Carlos was just saying, if you want to be a liberal, be a liberal. It's fine. I bet you a lot of the liberals are also against the genocide. We can talk about that. We can work together on it. But stop calling yourselves communists. The only problem we've ever had is that they call themselves communists. And I don't know if they're confused and refuse to teach themselves Marxism, which would kind of be worse than lying, or if they're lying. But it's got to be one or the other, because Marxism is very, very, very clear. And this is the opposite.
I couldn't agree more, boys.
What's up, brother?
Hey, what's up? And I gotta be careful with what I say because I'm technically a member of the party, so I gotta be careful on what I put out there. But all I'll say is vote with your conscience. Vote with your conscience. Obviously, I can't argue with any of the arguments that these guys have put forward. Everybody knows where I stand on the Democrats. But, let democracy play out. Let the people decide. And I truly believe that there are enough as Carlos said, enough dedicated communists, enough working class intellectuals, sort of natural working class intellectuals, who have risen up at this turbulent time where the contradictions of capital are heightening, and have entered the Communist Party, you know, and trained themselves up and ingratiated themselves with the party by following party protocol and following all the rules, you know. And, you know, I believe that there's enough of you to vote correctly on this. And it's not against party rules, you know, to vote correctly on this. It's not against any rules to follow democratic centralism and push the will of the party against supporting a genocide supporter. And, you know, I know there are people who share this position that we share on the Democrats who don't like us, who don't like our institute, or don't like certain positions we've taken on social issues or whatever. But I think it's time to come together against the party committing genocide and calling themselves progressive and leftist. It's bullshit.
It's bigger than that. It's a genocide. I mean, it requires people to set aside bickering and pettiness, right? Which we're always ready to do. We want to work with anyone who will help fight against these kind of things and fight for real communism.
If you can't put aside petty secondary contradictions that you might think you have with our institute, probably based on an abstract conception you have formed about us from clips various dubious leftists have put on Twitter. But if you can't put those petty secondary differences aside to stand together against genocide, you have to seriously reflect on how real your commitment for the Palestinian struggle is. How real is your commitment to stand against fascism? How real is your commitment to fight the forces carrying forth this genocide, to fight the Zionists? How real is that commitment if you can't put secondary issues aside in order to focus on the main issue at hand, which is a party attempting to pass a resolution that will give unconditional support to the forces of genocide? This is what we are. This is where we're at, folks. A party with a glorious hammer and sickle on its logo, with a beautiful history, attempting to pass a resolution to give unconditional support to the forces of genocide, to the forces throwing people into the meat grinder under the auspices of fighting against fascism. Everyone knows what this is. This is a blank check for supporting the Democrats. And if you can't put whatever petty differences you have with the people that like us, with the folks from the Institute aside to vote with your conscience on this issue, you are not serious about wanting to end this genocide. You're not serious about siding with the Palestinian liberation movement. You are not serious in your anti-Zionism and in your anti-imperialist struggle. And you might as well pack up and go home. Because if when it fucking counts, you can't grab your cojones and actually vote how you have to fucking vote. If in the moment when it counts, you don't have the courage to do what you have to do, you might as well not do it at all. I'm here very Aristotelian. If you don't have courage as the most foundational virtue of your character, you don't have any of them. Because whenever all those others count and you have to bring them forth through courage, you're not going to do it. You're going to cower out like a sissy. Grab your fucking balls and act with courage and vote with your conscience.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it any better. What do you think, Eddie?
No, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to stress that the party's based on democratic centralism. I read the party's constitution twice this week. I read it twice over, and democratic centralism is mentioned. Right, the party is supposed to function based on democratic centralism. Now, you could argue that the way that the national convention is selected and the way that certain officers are selected is not based on democratic centralism, but the democratic apparatuses that do exist in the party need to be utilized, to push the party in the direction that you want to see it as an educated working class person in the party, as an educated, as an organic communist intellectual. So there's nothing illegal about this. There's nothing that, about this that's entryism or tailism or whatever, the enemies might try and say. It's just taking a hold of our Communist Party, the Communist Party of the United States of America, that has all the history, that has all the legitimacy, that has a glorious history, as Carlos said. A Communist Party that used to be powerful and used to put fear in the hearts of the ruling class.
The party of Du Bois.
It's the party of Du Bois. And it hasn't been that lately. But because it is a party that's based on democratic centralism, because democratic centralism is in the Constitution, it can be saved by, enough good people being in the party and pushing it in the right direction. And I think this vote on Resolution 5 is a huge, it could be a huge turning point, or it could just be a huge measuring point to tell where we're at, and where the party's at. But yeah, it's an exciting juncture.
It is, and you bring up something I think is important, Eddie. The subject of tailism, right? One of there's like all of these weird sort of misinterpretations of old Marxist terms that get tossed all around the last period of American history's left that we're sort of coming out of nowadays, right? And one of them is the word tailism, right? This right here is a perfect example of tailism. To sort of run along after what you believe are the spontaneous movements of the masses, rather than being able to offer something to connect them all, right? And create a revolutionary, united struggle based on class, based on the proletariat. And I think it's sad that all mention of the proletariat is kind of gone from this section here, because what it does is sort of circumvent class analysis to view things in terms of left and right. And not only left and right, but an idealist view of what left and right are, based on, well, if you have this idea, you're left. If you have that idea, you're right, right? But that isn't the way Marxism even views this. Marxism views things from a materialist perspective, right? That what is left and right is not based on some ideas or how people see themselves or whatever. It's based on people's material position in society. And it's based on the random way the French Revolution's legislature sat in an auditorium. Those who were interested in going back to monarchy were sitting on the right-hand side. Those that were interested in moving forward to the republic, to socialism, to whatever, were sitting on the left-hand side. And so when we think about it, anything that actually positions itself to move society forward in any given epoch, and this looks different depending on where and when it happens, they are the left forces, materially speaking, right? But when people like those who obviously wrote this are saying left and right, they're not talking about it that way. They're talking about it in the bourgeois way. And that entire hamster wheel I keep bringing up is, materially speaking, the right way.
I couldn't agree more. It's also, I find it interesting, the sentence, we must defend the Constitution, as if the Constitution isn't tossed out completely by both parties and the real forces that run the country, the national security state or deep state or the dictatorship of capital, whatever you want to call it, within whatever lexicon you're operating with. But most Americans know that what we have in front of us every election cycle is a is a show. It's a spectacle, a political spectacle that in reality, politics has much more continuity than the ins and outs of whatever candidate or party. And that continuity they've come to describe as the deep state. And this deep state has no concern at all for the Constitution. That's why the First Amendment rights of professors, such as Danny Shaw, are tossed out whenever they say something that is inconvenient to the narrative around the Zionist entity. That is why students leading encampments within their own campuses are arrested, are beaten, are expelled from their universities. For what? For saying that they don't want their tax dollars to go to bombing babies and carrying forth the genocide. So their constitutional rights are violated for critiquing the direct actions of another country. The Constitution is completely tossed out. The most progressive parts of that bourgeois Constitution have been completely undermined. So if you're talking about defending the Constitution by, again, supporting the forces which have periodically and consistently undermined the most important parts of that Constitution, those first 10 amendments that guarantee certain rights for us, you cannot be serious about your commitment to defending the Constitution. You are either trying to lie to me or you're a fool. And both of those things are not good things to be. But it continues. Whereas the recent upsurge in labor militancy and the people's movement has mobilized hundreds of thousands of people into action, resulting in significant victories such as union organizing drives, historic wins for labor by the UAW, Teamsters, SAG, AFTRA, which is I believe it's the Hollywood one, the election of a progressive mayor in Chicago and Los Angeles, and the victory in Ohio to enshrine the right to reproductive health care into the state constitution. This is also extremely weirdly written because the sentence should not end there. These and many other recent examples show that when we organize and fight back, we can win. What's the purpose of this being here? If anything, what the argument should be here, which is true, if we organize and fight back, we can win. That should be an argument for not organizing with one side of the ruling class on the basis of some half-assed, incorrect assessment of it being the lesser evil. Yeah, if we organize our class, if we organize the popular people's forces, we can win. But who are we fighting against? Are we just fighting one side of the ruling class, the side that frankly is the most inconvenient to the deep state? We've all seen the persecution of Trump. I don't think he's a genuine anti-establishment figure, but he sure as shit does scare the deep state enough to do all this foolery that they've been doing against him. Is that the fight that we want to win? The fight against one specific slither of the ruling class? Or do we want to actually, as the public polls show, fight against that force that the people are discontented by, which is the system as a whole? I think that the role of the Communist Party is the latter, to fight, actually organize and win against the system as a whole, which is what we need right now. Not this bickering, this entering into this bourgeois ping pong game of one side and the other. You're still playing the same game. It doesn't matter which side of the table you hedge your bets with.
Well, that's the problem with seeing everything as left and right, especially with the point we're at in this country, where one of the bourgeois parties and the Democrats has co-opted all of this progressive and, quote unquote leftist rhetoric in order to portray themselves as the left-wing party. When you see everything is left versus right, it's easy to fall into what is actually right opportunism. Because you see the Democrats cloaking themselves in the LGBTQ flag. You see them cloaking themselves in this veil of wokeism and progressive rhetoric while supporting genocide, while supporting neoliberal economic policies, while supporting the outsourcing of good manufacturing jobs in middle America, all the things that socialists are against and all the things that destroy the working class both domestically and internationally. But then they say, we're better on than the Republicans on social issues. We're more woke than them, so you should vote for us. And if you see things by class, it becomes very obvious. Oh, these guys aren't in favor of me. They're not in favor of the working class. But if you see things as left and right, It's easy to be like, well, they're more left, they're waving the LGBTQ flag, even though they're not doing anything substantively and concretely for the working class. So that's why you have to see it as a class thing, more so than a left and right thing. So what if they're using woke rhetoric? What are they going to do to actually better the material conditions of working class gay people or working class people in general? It's easy for them to wave the LGBTQ flag and go to pride parades and march next to Raytheon and Boeing, right? But what are they actually doing for working class gay people? Not shit, right? Which is the value in seeing things based on class rather than seeing it based on left and right. And it also just leads to nihilism, right? Like, who wants to join the Communist Party ready for a revolutionary political movement and then go help local Democrat campaigns? Like, that's discouraging. That gets old. You're never going to see any progress, obviously, because the Democrats don't want progress. So people are going to get burned out that way. And it's easy to think, how are we going to convince all these Trump supporting workers to move left? Right. And that's the wrong way to think about it. Maybe they are going to disagree with you on social issues, and maybe you can bring them along on those issues, to more of your position. But all that really matters is that you turn them against the ruling class that they already hate. Right. Most of the working class already hates the ruling economic class because of the direct antagonism that exists between capital and labor, between the capitalist class and the masses. So if you see all these people who already hate the establishment and who hate U.S. imperialism and the fact that all of our tax dollars are funneled to Israel and Ukraine, if you dismiss those people as a basket of deplorables because they're not left on social issues, it's easy to get nihilistic and be like, oh, we're never going to get anywhere, right? But it's not about left and right. It's about working class versus the ruling class. I'm not saying social issues aren't important or you can't have those debates or bring people along on those issues. Or, I talk a lot about proletarian feminism and women's issues when I see what I dub to be misogyny within the American communist movement, right? It's a battle that I'm not afraid to fight. But yeah, seeing it as a battle of left and right, and we need to push all the workers to be more woke and use more woke language, like, that's not what it's about. And if you think that that's what it's about, you're going to become nihilistic and depressed. But if you see it as a class battle, there's a lot to be optimistic about in this country right now.
A whole lot. Carlos just texted us, by the way. His power just went out.
Yikes.
If anyone's wondering where he went, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about that. I hope his power comes back on soon. But like Eddie was just saying earlier, this is a classic example of tailism. I mean, these paragraphs read as tailism. And not only that, right opportunist tailism, right? Taking the privileged position of the middle class and saying, oh, we need to defend this and that and this, is textbook right opportunism. It's taking a right-wing turn in order to protect your middle class biases and position, rather than be revolutionary and turning yourself and the forces you're working with against the ruling class. I want to, we've had sort of a troll in the comments this whole time, but I want to bring something up that he says here, that we are too focused on the genocide. It's been going on for decades. I don't think you can be too focused on a genocide.
That's a wild
It is
statement.
a genocide.
That's a wild statement.
Wow. Oh, Carlos is back. Great. Well, honestly, I have to get going rather soon because it's very late for me. I have to be up at 4. So I'm glad your power's back on, brother.
Yeah, it just it went out of nowhere, and then it took a little bit for the Wi-Fi to come back, but we're good to go. The deep state's not taking me out anytime soon.
And on that point, there are now more people paying attention to Gaza and the genocide than there ever have been.
Mhm.
Right? So Norman Finkelstein has covered this issue his entire life, and he said before October 7th, he, as an intellectual who had spent his entire life studying Gaza, had given up. He had given up hope for the people of Gaza. He thought the world had just turned a blind eye to them and was going to allow them to be ethnically cleansed, because it has been going on for years and years and years, like you said. But now with this new generation of kids who's waking up, and this new generation of people who's having this sort of political enlightenment, there are more eyes on Gaza than there ever have been. There was a viral video there was a viral campaign that almost brought tears to my eyes, because apolitical people who I know were posting all eyes on Rafah on their Instagram stories and standing up for Gaza in mass. And our friend Libre, who's in Gaza right now, bringing medical supplies to those children and those people being genocided, says that the Palestinians talk about that. That the Palestinians say, guess what? The Americans are fighting against their own government. And that blows the minds of the Palestinians, because they're not used to that. They're used to the Americans ignoring them and allowing our government to genocide them. So I don't want to fucking hear that we're too focused on the genocide. I'm going to use my voice till the day I fucking die to raise attention to that genocide. I'm going to push every single person. And I've put it on my wrestling accounts. I posted on my personal accounts, right? Because this is against humanity. And any human with any kind of decency in their soul would stand up against this shit. So I'm going to use my platform and every relationship that I have to try and tell people about what's going on. And guess what? It's working. It's working. There is more attention on Rafah and more attention on Gaza and more resistance to this genocide than there ever has been. So to say we're too focused on this genocide, or anyone's too focused on this genocide, is absurd. We're the allies too focused on beating Hitler? Like, come on. Are we serious here?
Why does Marxism even focus on the proletariat? Because the proletariat is representative of all of humanity and our future. He calls it the ingenious soil of humanity. The process of the proletariats developing and taking power is the process of human history. And the class struggle right now is taking the form of a stand against this genocide. The forces of humanity is a material thing. It's not an idea that we can sort of shift to the side. We can't ignore the fact that this genocide is happening. We just can't. I don't know what's going on with our logo. It's going crazy up there.
Is it? I don't see anything.
Maybe it's like me sharing my screen and Carlos sharing his. I don't know. But like I'm watching our logo just bounce around left and right. It's weird. But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to take off. It's getting very late for me, unfortunately. I'll stick around for a little longer.
Where are we at in the resolution?
Whereas the growing working class militancy and unity is decisive to defeat Trump, MAGA, and the extreme right at the ballot box in 2024. The Communist USA is part of, in the thick of, the deepening struggle. Communists are independent, but in the mix of this exploding anti-extreme right coalition.
This is where they try to fool people into thinking that this is just some purely negative strategy. We're just voting against. We're just voting against MAGA. That is utter bullshit. People need to understand that this is an unconditional support. This is a blank check for Democrats. This is getting a cadre who could be organizing working people to fight against the system that produces these genocides, getting them to go door to door to support the Democrats. This is what this is. Do not be confused. They legally cannot tell you to support Democrats. To save face, they cannot tell you to support Democrats explicitly. But what they can tell you is somehow that you're going to be a part of this amorphous, never defined, never agreed upon coalition and all people's unity, as they like to refer to it, that no one but them knows of, to fight back against MAGA. Folks, do not be hoodwinked. This is a blank check to support the Democrats at a time when the Democrats are carrying forth a genocide. This is criminal. This is not only anti-communist, but fascistic. This is getting communists to literally support a fascist party, a party carrying forth a genocide. The difference here, as was discussed by us, is between Hitler and Himmler. It is no difference at all. It is no difference at all. In terms of substance, we're dealing with the same bullcrap on both sides, with two sides, two cheeks of the same ass, as George Galloway would say.
Can I say one thing real quick, Eddie?
Yeah, go for it.
So what really bothers me here is they confuse the middle class forces of the left of the last period of history, right? The one that failed in basically everything it did, with, quote, growing working class militancy and unity, right? These aren't proletarian forces. These aren't re-proletarian forces. These are middle class activists and professional NGOs. That is who this coalition is made up of. It's made up of I won't go into details, but everyone knows like the pretty much middle class activist scene. That's what it is. It's fully middle class.
Yes. Oh, I wanted to flesh out one of the points that Carlos made, because this is, one of the reasons that, and I'm not a super active member of the party. I'll be the first to say, I'm basically a paper member. But a lot of the reason for that is because a lot of the party's activities in Iowa, and this isn't all true, and there are rank and file people in Iowa who are doing great work, and I hope they're not offended by me saying this, because they're doing great work in their communities in Davenport and Dubuque and Des Moines, right? But a lot of the party's activities focus around Democratic campaigns and campaigning for local Democrats. So this resolution, and I'm not telling you which way to vote on it, but it is not just a vote whether should we vote for Joe Biden or not, right? It's a vote, like Carlos said, to determine what party cadres will be doing with their time and energy. Right? What will those who enter the CPUSA be doing with their time and energy? And every club has a lot of autonomy in the CPUSA. It's very decentralized. But the overarching push from national right now is to support Democrats, right? And that's the push that they're pushing down to the clubs and the officers, which has an effect. If this resolution goes the other way, right, then the party no longer has an obligation to do that and support Democrats. They voted, through democratic centralism to not do that. So now party cadres can focus their efforts elsewhere. They can go to the workplaces, they can go to the unions, and do all the things that the Communist Party manual from 1940 says. I know our friend in the comments just said we don't have a good grasp on the party, but I'm pretty sure the party manual doesn't say jack shit about organizing Democrats, and it says a whole lot about getting to the workplaces, the unions, and organizing the popular classes, which even in the party manual includes like small business owners who are, getting crushed by big capital. But instead, we're trapped in this left-right paradigm that in many ways the Democrats and Republicans have created, rather than seeing things as working class versus capitalist class. And that's why this resolution is so important.
Yeah, I want to answer a question real quick, because it ties into what we've been talking about the last 30 minutes. Offabung, which is a cool username, by the way, asks, how are you helping people with CPUSA break from the Democrats by tailing the GOP and Nick Fuentes' audience? This is precisely what we're talking about, viewing things in terms of like the bourgeois left and right. These are the only positions possible to see. This isn't what we're doing in any way, shape, or form. First of all, we already went over what tailism is, right? And that's not what it is. So you're using the word incorrectly, but that's fine. I understand what you mean. Secondarily, we're not tailing anyone or going after anyone besides based in class. And this is what happens to leftists who sort of get this sort of metaphysical brain rot going, right? That they can only see things in this left or right. If you're not pandering to them, you must be pandering to the other side. But the point is that we must organize the working class, regardless of where they have been, regardless of where they are. We organize ourselves to be a class for ourselves, of
Let-
and for ourselves.
Let me
Not
say
right,
something.
not left, working class.
Yes, let me say something in response to that too. This is a book called On Zionist Literature. And Ghassan Kanafani, the Palestinian Marxist-Leninist hero who was murdered by the Israeli Mossad when he was in his 30s because he was such a genius and such a great political leader. He was commissioned to write that book by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Marxist-Leninist political party in Palestine that used to be very big before they were directly targeted by the Zionists for extermination because they were too good at resisting. That book, the reason they wanted him to write that was so they could understand their enemy, so they could understand the ideology of their enemy, so they could understand Zionism and how they were tricking so many Jewish people and tricking so many Westerners into supporting a hateful ideology. And by doing this, by breaking down the Zionist ideology and deconstructing it, not only does he show that Zionism is different from Judaism, it's a manipulation of Judaism, but also he deconstructs all the core elements of the Zionist ideology so that you can understand it. And now anytime, right, I see a Zionist post something on Twitter, I understand it as being rooted in their ideology because I understand the historical materialist development of their ideology, how it's developed over the last 200 years and what they think. It's rooted in Jewish supremacy, right? It's basically an inverted form of Nazism. And ironically, Nick Fuentes' ideology is an inverted form of that. He's a wannabe Netanyahu. He just wants to do the same thing the Zionists have done, but for white people instead of for Jewish people. But anyways, you understand your opponent's ideology so you can argue with them, right? And that's why I'm able to destroy Zionists on Twitter and get like 1,000 likes replying to Zionists on Twitter because I know what they're all about. And I'm able to deconstruct their tweets in a second because I understand their ideology. It's the same thing with Fuentes, right? The leftists are too scared to take him on. The leftists are too scared to deconstruct his dumbass ideology and explain how it works and explain how he's the same thing as the Zionists. And they feed off each other. All he does is talk about Zionism. Oh, look at what the Jews are doing. Israel's doing all this in the name of the Jews. We need to do it too as white people. They feed off each other. And then the Zionists point at him and they go, look, all of our critics are anti-Semites and white nationalists. Right. And they feed off each other that way. But when you understand the philosophical underpinnings of their ideology, when you understand what they're all about, then you can take them down. You can deconstruct them for people and pull people away from that heinous, hateful, murderous ideology. So because I deconstruct their arguments, because I take the time to actually understand why young kids are listening to Nick Fuentes and take the time to deconstruct his ideology and push people towards communism instead, that's me reaching out to his fans and being a Fuentesite? No. The left is just too scared to understand our enemies. They're like, oh, don't debate them. Hide in a corner. Hide in your leftist bubble. Those guys are evil, and they are evil, right? Netanyahu and Nick Fuentes are evil. But we have to understand our enemies. That's why the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine commissioned Kanafani to write this book. And that's why Kanafani did such a damn good job. Because you got to know your enemy. That's Sun Tzu, The Art of War. That's like basic shit. But the left is too scared to do that. They just sit in their echo chambers and talk about not debating people. Why? These people are idiots. Once you understand their ideology, you see that they're morons. We have the truth on our side. Why not show people the truth? But if you try and show people the truth, oh, you're tailing MAGA. Oh, you're tailing the Nick Fuentes fans. No, I'm destroying Trump. I'm destroying Nick Fuentes, and that's why more and more people are coming and listening to us. How the fuck are you supposed to do that sitting inside a leftist echo chamber and ignoring any ideas that aren't yours? No, I don't agree with Nick Fuentes. No, I don't agree with Zionism. But they're my enemies, so I'm going to take the time to understand them so I can rip them to shreds. I mean, there's really very little thought of strategy on the left today. Everybody needs to read The Damn Art of War. Right? You're not a fascist because you understand what the fascists are saying so that you can destroy them. So annoying.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I don't think that Aufhebung, they're doing the same crime to the term as the party's policy does to the party, because I mean they're just outright lying in the chat saying that MAGA communism is about supporting Trump. and the Republicans, and somehow claiming that our support for the tactic of MAGA communism, which is not an ideology, our support for the tactic of pulling away MAGA workers from Trump to communism is somehow connected to rejecting the rest of the working class that's not MAGA. So, I mean, whoever that Aufhebung person is, I don't think they're a
Seems
good
like a
faith
troll.
actor. By the way, Joey,
I'm watching lots of lies.
Sorry.
White Joey, thank you so much, Joey. I greatly appreciate the alliance you guys are forming with them, Fred. Y'all will be stronger than the CPUSA and the Groypers combined. I don't know who the Groypers are. Who are the
That's
Groypers?
the Nick
The
Fuentes.
Nick
man.
Fuentes,
Hopefully,
weird fans.
we'd
They all
love the
basically just believe
CPUSA to
in
be
MAGA.
part of this alliance, to be clear. We would love to have all those people in the CPUSA working together, but
Absolutely.
not the Groypers.
Not
not
the
them.
But yeah,
Or at least
especially
not
against-
as Groypers.
well, here's my thing. Like, okay, Elon Musk goes to the Zionist country and like puts on this whole big show, and then it's clearly a huge Zionist, and then suddenly the perfect person to say, oh look, all the anti-Zionists are actually anti-Semites is allowed back on Twitter. Very fishy for me. But at the end of the day, all they do is believe in magic. They believe that your blood and your sort of race actually controls what you do and how you think. They genuinely believe that. But yeah, you can pull that question back up. I'm gonna take off right after we answer it, though. I'm dead tired, guys.
I just thought it was an interesting question. It had to do with what I was talking about Zionism and how all these ideologies build off each other. Yeah, and I don't know if the Zionists were explicitly inspired by Manifest Destiny, but whether subconsciously or consciously, Zionism is definitely intertwined with Nazism or inspired or motivated by Nazism, which was explicitly inspired by the Manifest Destiny ideology. So yeah, all these ideologies of racial supremacy sort of mirror each other and feed off one another. And then these groups who pretend to be enemies, like the Zionists and the Groypers, they just want the same thing. Like I said, we're saying, no, the Zionists are wrong. They believe in Jewish supremacy. They believe in having an ethno-state. They don't believe in assimilation, right? They believe in having a fascist ethno-state. They don't believe in assimilating to other countries. And, it was easy for the Zionists to make that argument when anti-Semitism was raging in Europe and the Holocaust was going on. But what we're saying is, no, we want multiculturalism. We don't want an ethno-state, right? We are pro-assimilation. Zionism is not the same as Judaism, right? The Groypers accept the same premise as the Zionists. They say, no, Zionism is Judaism. The Jews are fighting for themselves and we should fight for ourselves as whites. And because Israel has an ethno-state and because the Zionists do claim to represent the Jewish people, even though they don't, it makes it much easier for Fuentes and the other fascists to make their argument. So white supremacy feeds off of Jewish supremacy, feeds off of Aryan supremacy, feeds off of Manifest Destiny and the myths of supremacy that were told to justify the genocide of the Native Americans. I don't know if that's the PC term anymore, but it's all the same shit. This fascism it's all the same shit, and they all feed off each other. It's all racial-based warfare instead of class-based warfare.
In other words, the worst possible thing that could happen to Zionists is for people like Nick Fuentes and Lucas Gage to not exist. Those people are indispensable for Zionists. They're indispensable for Zionists. That's just an objective fact. And as far as manifest destiny is the form imperialist ideology takes in a burgeoning American republic, capitalist republic. And of course, central components, as Eddie mentioned, are going to replicate other forms of imperialist ideologies, the Nazi or the Zionist. Huge W from L. That's a constant theme in these streams. L with 50 memberships. Thank you so much, L. As I'm fond of saying, their name might be L, but that was a big W. Thank you
We
so much.
love,
That's a
we
huge
love
amount
Al.
of gifts. And I don't know if L is trying to remain anonymous, but all I'll say is I recommend, this has nothing to do with Al giving us these gifts, but the Arkansas Worker account on Instagram is pretty good. And they post a lot of great Marxist material. So if anyone wants to go follow that Arkansas Worker account, I would highly recommend it. I'm not sure what that has to do with Al, but just putting that out there.
Nothing really, but
I had no idea.
thank you, Al. We all love Al, but I'm gonna take off for the night, y'all. Thank you, everybody, and sorry, I gotta get to work in the morning, so I really gotta go. But have a great rest of your stream, brothers. I'll see everybody later.
See you, Noah.
See you, brother. Here's another one we can tackle from Sophic Manatee. Why does Midwestern Marx constantly denigrate leftists if y'all advocate not framing things in a left-right paradigm? We don't denigrate necessarily. I mean, there's a few things that are operative here. I still think that according to the basic definition of left and right that comes out of the French Revolution, where left are the forces of progress and right are the forces of reaction and conservatism. What posits itself as left in the US that explicitly claims to be left is not really left at all. And part of what we're doing is showing how those forces are not what they enunciate themselves to be, what the limitations, what the fetters are that prevent them from actually being left, which in our context is not the same as the French Revolution context. In our context, it means being a communist and not just calling yourself a communist, but actually being a communist, opposing the institutions of the imperialist state in all the forms that it takes, not just in the socially conservative form that some parties and people are fond of opposing just in that form. We denigrate leftists because it's been the left communists that have a historical mission to lead the working class, to show the working class what its historic role is, and they're failing at a moment when the objective conditions are quite revolutionary. The whole purpose of my book on the purity fetish is to show how the left has failed to rise up to the occasion and to its task, which is fundamentally to lead us into a new form of life at a moment when the conditions are right for that. And I trace it not just as a problem of the left, but as a problem of the left fundamentally not really being a left, which means people who call themselves Marxists not actually having a Marxist worldview, but being guided at the level of worldview by the purity fetish. That's how I would answer that. How would you approach that, Eddie? Eddie, you're muted.
Yeah, I would come at it a little differently. I got the purity fetish right there. I love your answer. I haven't written a book systematically putting out my criticisms of the left because they're contained in the book written by my best bro, who's sitting right there. But read Lenin, and I used to think that when I would read Lenin, I'd be like, why the hell is he talking about the left-wingers so much? Why the hell does he spend so much time criticizing these other left-wing groups? And it was because they had the same situation. There's the actual book. They had the same situation in Russia that we have today, where you had all these leftist wreckers, these anarchists, these left opportunists, these Mensheviks, social chauvinists running around and calling themselves left. And Lenin had to make it very clear what the Bolsheviks were actually about and how they distinguished themselves from the other quote unquote left-wing groups at the time. And what's interesting is if you read a book like Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, it's like, holy cow, does this apply today? It's like the same forms of right opportunism and the same forms of sort of reactionary ultra left elements, the same forms of reactionary pseudo Marxists that we have today was what was plaguing them back then. So I used to wonder why Lenin would write so much about left people, but then you get more involved in the left and you see these errors in strategy that need to be corrected. And if you can make good arguments, honest people who want to change the world and who want a better society in our material conditions and build a better world for our kids will be won over by those arguments. A lot of people have been won over by the purity fetish. A lot of people in Russia were won over by left-wing communism and infantile disorder. So it's not necessarily to shit on the left per se, but it's just to hammer out our line and to explain why we think that line is important. And when people we respect do the same to us, we listen. Like when people call us fascists who are tailing Trump, like what am I supposed to do with that? It's not true. I'm not a fascist. I'd never voted for Donald Trump in my life. Or told anybody to vote for Donald Trump. What am I supposed to do with that critique that's based on stuff I don't even believe? But when Anthony Montero says, oh, you guys are American Marxists, well, why the hell aren't you talking about MLK and Du Bois? And then I pick up MLK and Du Bois. I'm like, oh, that motherfucker was right. He was spitting. We need these people to recapture our American history and combat national historical nihilism. It's perfect. Everything we're missing from the left is in Du Bois, MLK, James Baldwin, Henry Winston. And it's so important. Like Lenin spent so much time studying Russian history. Why would we not spend so much time studying American history? Right. So if they can make a genuine critique of our line, it can help us be better as Marxists. It can help us be better as communists. And that's why we spend so much time honestly critiquing the left.
That was a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
And when you learn something and you take it up, that's an admission of the fact that you were limited. In some ways, that there was parts of your understanding that were either wrong or not fully refined yet. And I think what we have shown as an institute over the last 4+ years of operation is that we're open to learning. We want to learn, and we want people to challenge us genuinely, not just to condemn us on the basis of abstract understandings of what supposedly we said or what we said and was misinterpreted. But if you can come to us with a good argument as to why one or another thing we've said is incorrect and how we can have a better Marxist understanding of such phenomena, we will listen. We have historically listened, and in the areas where we could improve, I think we've had. The first thing I did after Dr. Montero told us that we could have improved in that area was literally just spend the whole year reading Du Bois. And I produced an academic paper on Du Bois that outlines our line. And by the way, it's been behind a paywall for an extremely long time. And now I'm writing another version of it that's more comprehensive. It's called Why We Need American Marxism. That will be the introduction to Noah's pamphlet on reproletarianization. But the point is we actually listened and we went and we educated ourselves. So if you have genuine critiques, please feel free to bring those forth. But if you're just going to sit around and call people who live in poverty and spend their free time engaging in the class struggle, losing potential employment opportunities, getting attacked, getting censored, if you're just going to call us fascists, we have the right to say, go fuck yourself. Joey, thank you so much, brother, for another $2 donation. See you, Noah. You base as fuck. Noah is indeed based. Apostle Paul, #1 fan. Pretty great name. F-Mass, Eddie, tweet, like, fiasco, those dummies. That was so, I mean, Haas was talking about this yesterday, but when people have had the way they view the world so distorted to look out for certain things, there's going to be confirmation biases for those distortions that are going to be found in the world. And you have literally done nothing but argue in favor of the class struggle, against fascism, against imperialism, for your whole online life as a political persona. And people have manipulated things you have said to the point where a tweet you had never seen gets somehow liked by your account. And now somehow that is a confirmation of you being a secret Nazi or a mistake in wording in one of your TikToks where you meant to say religious and racial and ethnic, but you said classes. Somehow these two small mistakes, the second one, which is extremely dubious as to its origin, because you had never seen the post itself. And it's interesting how that sort of post appears on your timeline. It's not like if you're liking fascist things, you're combating it. You're trying to fight the Nazis. It's very interesting how these two things that if anyone's been following your work and knows you concretely, that means comprehensively, can recognize for what it is, now gets pulled out of context by very dubious characters like Roderick Day and the Saturn fellow and all these other people that their resumes must say professional wreckers because that's how they operate. There's just professional wreckers. The Roderick Day fella, by the way, and I'll let you talk because this is your affair. The Roderick Day fella, he made some tweets about the purity fetish, and I had no idea who he was. I'd seen a couple articles from his website on Losura, and I was like, oh, cool, this is someone who might be genuinely waging a critique against the purity fetish. Let me engage with it and see where I can learn. I did. I spent the whole day replying to him. And then I guess he's just completely deleted that and then reposted the critique. And now he spends, every time he lambasts us, he says that he brought forth a critique of the purity fetish and we never replied to him, which is just a lie. It is a fucking lie. I spent a whole day replying to him, assuming he was an honest actor. And I guess he deleted it all and then went ahead, did a new one. And because I never fucking saw it or we never saw it, he's been just sharing it around in a very bad faith manner, saying we never replied to him. It's utter bullshit. And he can go fuck himself, honestly. I mean, that's bad faith acting. Anyone who's ever brought a genuine critique of the purity fetish towards me and not just called me a revisionist theorist for not bombing a swing set as good praxis, good Maoist praxis, go fuck yourself. That's all I could say. You're not honest. You're not serious. And, we engage with people who critique us seriously, but those that don't, then,
Yeah, and we've got, not to make it about this, but we've got, high profile debates going on with like right wingers on TikTok that are being viewed by like hundreds of thousands of people, or debates about China with right wingers that are being viewed by hundreds of thousands of people and are, having an effect on how young kids growing up in the world who consume a lot of media on TikTok are seeing China and are seeing existing socialism. So like the idea that we're supposed to keep up with every, critique on Twitter anyways and respond to all of them and we're pieces of crap if we don't respond is ridiculous. And then to hear that he manipulated things like that so that it looked like we didn't respond is insane. But yeah, I mean, I get the tweet that I liked looked bad. Right. And obviously, like that's something that our enemies can take out of context, and they have. But what they're doing, so first of all, I had never seen that tweet, which is why, and the Manatee, Sophic Manatee kind of made a joke about this, which one of Eddie's pockets liked it. The reason I'm saying it was my pocket and not my thumb is because I never saw that tweet in my life. I had never seen that tweet or that account. I guess one of our allies actually BTFO'd that account a while back and they blocked a bunch of our followers. But I had never seen the account. I had never seen it in my life. So, I mean, sometimes I put my phone in my pocket and then, you pull it out and you realize it's been doing stuff in your pocket. That's what I assumed happened if I didn't actually get hacked by the NSA. But anyways, and I immediately apologize and explain what happened. And that post has like 400 likes, right? People have seen it. Immediately apologized, explain what happened. Same with the thing where I called for like class unity or said the confusing thing about class, where it sounded like I was calling for class collaboration because I misspoke. Immediately apologized about that too. And I'm an incredibly forgiving person, right? And I try not to hold things against people. Carlos knows this about me. That's how I function in real life. I'm not one to hold grudges and hate people. It's just not in my character. But if you are sharing that like tweet, extreme right pocket, that's funny. But if you are sharing that tweet and you are saying that without sharing my apology and explanation and saying Midwestern Marx and Eddie Liger are now openly fascist, I am never going to forgive you. I'm never going to trust you. And I think you are one of the most slimy, disgusting pieces of shit I could possibly imagine in my life. To ignore my apology, to ignore my explanation, to ignore the fact that I've done 4 years of work combating Nazism, to ignore the fact that I'm one of the only people on the left who will take on the fascists head on and the Zionists head on because I'm not scared of their ideology, because Ghassan Kanafani gave me the tools to destroy it, and I actually read it, unlike most of the left who plays video games all fucking day. Right? Because I actually take them on head on, like most of you cowardly leftists are too scared to do. Yeah, there's a lot of Zionist shit and a lot of Nazi shit on my timeline. And when I put my phone in my pocket, I probably accidentally liked one of their tweets. But now you're ignoring all of that work that I've done combating fascism, all of that work that I've done combating Nazism, not to make a genuine critique of Midwestern Marx, but to take a mistake and use it to smear us and claim that we're openly Nazis now. Like, what the hell are you talking about? And anybody who sees or knows what our account is actually about, who sees that, should dismiss you forever and know that you're a fucking liar. But I just want to say, if you've critiqued us in the past, if you've gotten mad at us in the past, I'll forgive you. And I even reached out to someone who doesn't like Midwestern Marx, who has, what I consider to be ultra positions, who doesn't like that we have an alliance with Haas and Jackson or whatever. But they tweeted out, yeah, Eddie's not a Nazi. He definitely liked that tweet by accident. Okay, I can respect that. I can be friends with you. I can have tolerant disagreements with you. But to lie and to claim that we're out in the open Nazis when we never have been, you are scum of the earth, dude. I don't know how these people live with themselves. You're disgusting. You're everything I don't want to be in this life. You're everything I don't want the kids who I coach to be in this life. I want them to be honest and upstanding and give people the benefit of the doubt. You guys are scumbags who live on Twitter, and your souls will never recover from being the absolute pieces of shit that you are. And you can get the hell out of communism because you're worthless to us.
Based. Thank you so much, Justin, for the $5. Can you guys give a rebuttal to those who allege we are Strasserites?
That's what I did in my class collaborationist video. I explained how the Strasserites are actually class collaborationists and we're actually anti-Semitic, and we're not. And people took that video and used it to say that we're anti-Semitic class collaborationists. It's the opposite of what I was saying. You dumb bastards. Maoist Red Guard. Get out of your mom's house and go do something with your life.
That's not blowing up swing sets.
Yes, right.
Kevin Christensen. Thank you, sir. Eddie, when will you be on the Deprogram podcast?
I like the Deprogram guys. First of all, let me say that. Do not go attack the Deprogram guys. The Deprogram guys are doing good work. They are introducing a lot of people to Marxist-Leninist theory, and even like Hassan Piker's, a good pipeline to accounts like ours, but I wish he would hammer reading more with his audience. The Deprogram hammers reading all the time, right? They're good on stuff like that. But I think they're a little bit captive to their audience, and their audience is a little bit of a leftist bubble. So the Deprogram, if you look at their Reddit and you search Midwestern Marx on the Deprogram Reddit, you'll see a lot of very posts where people are very active shitting on us, right? Calling us pat socks, calling us whatever. I went into one of those Reddit posts and I tried to have a conversation with them and actually explain our theory. And I sent a video of Carlos having a conversation with Haas and said, this was our conversation with Haas. I think you guys would like it. And, you could see where we're coming from this. And I got blocked. I got banned from their Discord for being a pat sock was the message I got on Reddit. Sorry, it wasn't Discord. It was Reddit. I got banned from their Reddit. And it said I was banned for being a pat sock. And then I reached out to the Deprogram guys very respectfully. Said, hey, guys, I love what you do. But if your Reddit's going to constantly be shitting on us, at least let me engage with your audience. At least let me talk with them and explain what we actually think. And their response was that they have no control over what their Reddit page does. And I think they probably could have got a hold of one of their Reddit moderators and told them to unban us, but I don't think they want to do that. I think they would be scared of their community being like, why are you allying with those pat socks? Right? And Mao was patriotic. Lenin was patriotic. We've been over this a million times. Ho Chi Minh said he came to communism through patriotism. right? So the idea that you're going to ban everybody from your communist movement or from your leftist bubble because they have patriotic feelings and because they want to improve the country rather than tearing it down is anti-communist, and it's absurd, and it'll prevent them from growing, I think. It'll prevent them from reaching outside of that leftist bubble. So I would love to go on the deprogram. I would love to talk to Hakeem, Second Thought, or Ugopnik again. I've talked to Second Thought or Ugopnik, but I don't think they would, because I think they're scared of how their audience would react. And they're scared that people would unsubscribe to them because they're talking to Pat Socks. So that's my critique of the deprogram, guys. I think they do good stuff. We've talked about this a lot in our Discord lately, but man, imagine if the deprogram joined forces with us. Imagine if the deprogram's, giant audience and resources were going towards the same kind of stuff that we were trying to accomplish. It would be unreal, because ultimately we have the same goals of ending U.S. imperialism and advancing the class struggle, and ultimately they reach a different audience than us, maybe a little bit more liberal leaning audience, but we need to bring those people in too. But there's no thinking that way. There's no thinking like, Midwestern Marx does things a little different, Infrared does things a little different, but hey, our core goals are the same. Let's work together. There's not a whole lot of that on the left.
No, you are absolutely right, and that's one of the things that for a very long time we have appreciated about Infrared, that they are like that. They've always known that we've done things a little differently, but they've still kept open space for dialogue through that. And there's some other groups that do it somewhat more inconsistently, but yeah, it's very sad because they have a lot of potential, like you said. A lot of eyes, a lot of reach, and but they are captive to some of the more ridiculous parts of their audience. I mean, this should not be a debate. This should have never been a debate. I mean, you're either a communist who understands explicitly that means patriotism, love of your people, wanting to improve them, and that patriotism is how you get genuine internationalism, or you're a communist who spontaneously, intuitively loves her people, but who's not reflecting on what it is. You can't be a communist, reflect on what it is that you're doing, and not understand it as this basic understanding of patriotism, as love of your people, as rooting your struggle in the fact that you're waging it in a specific country. We're not fighting to take power in fucking Malaysia or something, or in China. Like, we're in the US. That means that it has to have American characteristics. It's so basic, but
and I think if we got to explain that to them, they'd agree, honestly, one-on-one. But the difference between super patriotism and proletarian patriotism. But right now it's just their Pat Socks audience doesn't like them, they're out. And I'll always respect JT for building a giant audience and then becoming a Marxist-Leninist, which is why I don't totally understand that now he's not willing to, work with different viewpoints. And maybe they are willing and they just have no control over their Reddit page. But like, I just know if we were in that situation, if somebody in our Discord was like, bullying Hakeem or something, or shitting on him, and then they blocked him so he couldn't even respond, I would definitely intervene and make sure that wasn't going on in our community anymore. So if the shoe was on the other foot, I would handle it differently. And so it upsets me a little bit because I like those guys, but yeah.
This is the other one, Comrade Confusion. Parti Socialiste Malaysia is a safe space for LGBTQ. Congratulations, that's awesome. Thank you for the super chat, comrade. Sophic Manatee. Which of Eddie's
podcasts? We already responded to that one.
Sorry.
Thank you, Manatee, though.
Where are we at?
How do you guys feel about Dugan? What do you know about him? Have you read anything? I haven't really read anything. I see his tweets. They're always, interesting analysis, but I don't really know.
I have been following him for quite a few months. The stuff that he's been writing in these months and some things he's written previously. I'm not going to say that I'm a specialist in everything he's written. He's a man that writes a lot. I think he is the intellectual archetype of the Russian state. I don't mean that in the sense of like the liberal, he's Putin's brain or whatever the fuck, but he's a good reflection of like the current state of Russia. Clearly not communist, a lot of idealist components, strange hodgepodge of some leftists and right ideas. But ultimately, in terms of the global conjuncture and the movement of history and the importance of multipolarity, standing on the right side, but with a lot of contradictions that are going to have to be dealt with. I'll leave it at that. I mean, I appreciate reading him, but I don't like him as a philosopher. I think he's idealist in the worst parts of that term. Use your head 414. As a Wisconsinite, now South Dakotan, pure Midwesterner, I'm so grateful for your institute and coalition you guys are a part of. Forget the haters. Thank you so much, comrade. Thank you so much. And he's a fellow Wisconsinner.
Yeah, Wisconsin cheeseheads rise up, even though I'm a Viking fan. Thank you that very much. Or thank you for that very much. Yeah, it's easy to forget about haters when we have such amazing hardcore fans and you recognize what they're doing in real life. And I won't get into the details now, but a lot of the people leading the cancel campaign against us, we know what they've done in terms of real life organizing, and they're disasters. Every organization that they touch goes to shit because they're individualistic. They can't stop fighting with people on Twitter. They can't do what's best for the party because they're too emotional and obsessed with social media, and they just say whatever they want impulsively. They don't have the communist ethic. And when we went to the Free America to Free Palestine event, this is why I've been so open about the alliance with Haas and Jackson, is because we met all these dedicated communists, these people, trying to act like stand-up people in their community to gain the respect of their community and coworkers, these people who are in the party working to make it better, these people who are joining unions and organizing on the shop floor to do the work that needs to be done. It's like, okay, who cares if all these shitbirds on Twitter, who are jokes anyways, oh my gosh, I can't stop getting texts, if they're dunking on us when we are helping to educate all these people who are doing the real work. Like, who cares how many likes they can get on Twitter? We've got people in the workplaces, and that's all that matters. So I'll trade in 1 million ultra leftist Twitter addicts for one of the Midwestern Marxist communists that we brought into our community. So thank you, user head 414. I appreciate you. Glad you guys don't grift with religion like others. Well, Carlos is highly religious.
What?
He prays every night. No, I don't know what you mean by grifting with religion, but I always give my honest thoughts on religion, which is sometimes hard for me because I grew up in a very, very religious family where everyone's still, faith is their number one thing. And I'm over here doing communism, number one thing. But, communism and faith are compatible. I got my dad a book that Carlos recommended me called the Common Call to Revolution, Marxists and Christians or something, about the overlap. So I just try to tell the truth about what I think and talk about, religion's negative aspects and its positive aspects. Obviously, it is used as a part of the superstructure to reinforce the existing relations of production. Yeah, that's the book. My dad just recently finished it, I think. We know that religion can be a part of the capitalist superstructure that reinforces the mode of production, but it can also be, radical. The Black church was a site of for people to meet during the civil rights movement. There was a similar thing going on at the churches with runaway slaves and freed slaves. So they've also been a site of revolutionary struggle, and obviously we're tolerant of everybody's religious beliefs as communists. It's a myth that communist societies just put the ban hammer on religion. We want people to be able to have their beliefs.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever prayed in my life, which is interesting. I went into a church when I was little, and I don't know, I was in there like mockingly. I wasn't I knew from that moment I did not have one religious bone in my body, which sucks because I like religious music, like the hymns and shit. But yeah, this is a great book from Jose Miguel Bonino, Christians and Marxists. And there's a line early on in the book where the Christians and the Marxists were like the Spider-Man meme, where they were like pointing at each other, like, "What are you doing here?" And then they realized, well, we're both kind of fighting for the same thing, and they realized it in the moment of struggle, and then that sort of gives birth to this very interesting dynamic of liberation theology, Christian socialism, basically. The last super chat we got here so far, Kat Yusha. On the topic of CPUSA, what do you think about their shift following the death of Gus Hall? What do you think of CPUSA? Thank you so much, Katusha, for the $5 super chat. I think, unfortunately, some of the policy, specifically with regards to the Democrats, had already started in the late period of Gus Hall, so there is some continuity there. But it doesn't get to its zenith liquidationism until Sam Webb and then Bechtel. And I think what we have now is like the substance of the liquidationism of the Webbite period without the form that it took. And there's been many important parts of the party that were like liquidated, like the Political Affairs Theoretical Journal that was literally in universities around the country. People had it in their syllabus and stuff, articles from it. There was the YCL that was liquidated for a period of time. And in terms of the substance of communist politics, that's been, in essence, liquidated for a while. As far as PCUSA, I haven't had much engagement with them. I participated, I taught for 1 week on the 26th of July movement for the People's PSMLS, the People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies, and it went very well. There was a lot of friends of the institute in there. So I have I don't have any substantive critique. I don't know much about them, but the people I've interacted with have always been really cool.
Yeah, agreed. Chris Halali is one of my favorites. PCUSA has been in contact with us recently. I think they're very interested by our alliance with Haas and Jackson. And yeah, obviously I'm in CPUSA still, but I have good relations with a lot of PCUSA people and really like their line. Chris, I'm doing an event with Chris this Sunday. I don't know why I forgot to bring that up. If you want to come, if you're in the Chicago area, reach out to Slava or Donald Corder or the Revolution Report on Twitter. They'll give you the address. We're not making the address public so that I don't get shot and Chris doesn't get shot. But if you want to come to that and hang out and hear my speech and Chris's speech, message the Revolution Report on Twitter. And yeah, Gus Hall was a G. Based from what I understand, things kind of fell apart after Gus Hall. He was the one fighting against right opportunism and fighting for, just basic orthodox Marxism, reaching the working class, traditional communist organizing tactics. And when he left, there was nobody to really do that. From my understanding, obviously I wasn't around, but the party went in a negative direction after him. So I have a lot of respect for him for holding stuff together and fighting against the liberals. Especially he was the chair till 2000, right? Was when he was done.
Yeah, I think Sam Webb picks it up in the late 90s. I might be wrong.
All right.
He died in the early 2000s. I have a clipping of the Miami Herald article from when he died.
Oh, really? But yeah. I have so much respect for people who lived through the period of the collapse of the Soviet Union and didn't give up. Because there's so many people who in the Soviet Union collapsed, like, oh, well, I guess we're liberals now. I guess, we'll forget everything we knew about Marxism and socialism. And the people like Parenti and the people like Gus Hall who didn't do that, I just think is super badass. And I get why the people who did it, but it's still kind of shameful. And it's makes you really proud of the people who didn't. And L says, Free America to Free Palestine was the first communist event I've ever been to where I wasn't embarrassed to be there. You're not wrong, brother. There was nobody well, there was one smelly guy, but only one out of 200 is a really good ratio.
Was that the guy that said the Hitler thing?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. That's almost like op-like behavior.
Yes, it is.
Let's see, going through the chat. Roland Board does interesting work on Christianity and Marx. Yes, he's got like literally 20 books on the subject. Like, I don't know how the fuck he writes so much. He's got like a 5-book series on the subject. We talked to him specifically about Christianity and Marxism sometime last year. We hope to have him back on and to talk about China or his recent work on Engels and socialism and power. He's one of my favorite philosophers and theologians of the modern era that are alive.
Thanks, Jim. Well, anything else you wanted to touch on, Carlos? Made it through our super
I don't know.
chat.
Do you want to bring up the your TikTok about Wyatt Reed? We could talk about that for a
Yes.
minute. Have you done any TikToks on Ritter and Judge Neapolitano? What's the Napolitano?
Judge Neop. I haven't done any on the judge, but I've done one on Ritter. Yeah.
Okay, because they were in the same plane.
Did the judge get kicked off?
I think yeah. I believe that's what I saw in Scott's tweet.
I didn't know that.
I believe they're in the same plane. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but they had their passport confiscated and they were detained. They couldn't get to, and they were going to be in a panel with our comrade Jackson Hinkle for the St. Petersburg Economic Forum.
So here's the one about our friend Wyatt Reed. Wyatt Reed's the man. He's from like the southern U.S. He defended us. He defended Oliver Anthony's song "Richmond, North of Richmond" and tried to tell people what that song meant to working class people all across America and why that song went viral.
The judge was not on the plane, by the way.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay. But I love Wyatt Reed. Not only is he an amazing journalist, an independent journalist who, risks his life to report stuff, who's been blackballed from the corporate media because of his reporting, but he's also just a really good guy and shares a really similar line to our line. So I was just freaking furious when I saw the Washington Post was really trying to get him arrested for working with Press TV, which let's just watch the TikTok.
Didn't he almost get bombed too last year? He almost got bombed in Donbass. The place he was staying in Donbass got the literal place got bombed, and he was walking towards it. He was like a block out when it landed or something. So a real deal journalist, not like the fake cosplaying journalist that wrote the hit piece on him.
So the Washington Post just published a horrible hit piece about Wyatt Reed, a fantastic journalist and friend of Midwestern Marx, who it seems like they're literally trying to get put in jail. They're saying that he received thousands of dollars from Press TV, a news outlet connected to the Iranian government, which is so, that makes me laugh. Thousands of dollars. He's making thousands of dollars. Oh my goodness, thousands of dollars. So enough to what? Pay his rent for a month? Holy shit, he's really raking it in compared to Rachel Maddow, who makes $30 million a year. Which is absurd for a couple reasons. For one, American reporters like Rachel Maddow are being paid $30 million a year to lie to you. And this is someone who pushed the Russiagate conspiracy on her show for years, only for us to find out through the Mueller report that almost none of the things she was reporting were actually true. And MSNBC is willing to pay her $30 million, but they would never hire a journalist like Wyatt Reed. Because Wyatt Reed is actually a good journalist who reports on the truth, who doesn't suck up to U.S. power in the State Department.
And if you do that, if you do your job as a journalist, you will be blackballed from the American corporate media. So yeah, he did some work for Press TV, who a lot of good journalists do work for. They may be connected to the Iranian government, but they allow a far wider range of opinions than what's allowed in the American corporate media. So a lot of great journalists have no option but to publish with outlets like this or RT. This is one of the reasons we started Midwestern Marx, so that good journalists would actually have a place to publish their stuff. And I mean, think about how absurd this is. They're attacking an independent journalist for making thousands of dollars when there are journalists in the United States who are getting paid millions of dollars to do the bidding of Wall Street. Just because MSNBC is owned by mega corporations and Press TV is connected to the Iranian government, we think that one's propaganda and the other's not. The private media is every bit as propagandistic as government media. Also, the Gray Zone, the outlet that Wyatt Reed works for now, is independent. They make all of their money through crowdfunding. So people are now trying to tie this Iranian funding accusation to the Gray Zone themselves, which is completely absurd. It's a freaking lie. From the same outlet that's literally owned by Jeff frickin' Bezos. So you guys aren't doing propaganda for corporate media, but Wyatt Reed is because he's getting a couple $1,000s from a news outlet in Iran? The hypocrisy here is insane, but that's what these people do. That's their job. That's why Jeff Bezos purchased them. We could use the media as a tool to advance his own interests and to make the American public stupid and to attack people who actually tell the truth. Solidarity with Wyatt Reed. Washington Post can suck. So
it's just insane, dude. It's a Jeff Bezos owned outlet calling other people propagandists. Like, how could you as a journalist be working for Jeff Bezos and getting paid way more than a few $1,000, attack an independent journalist for working with Iranian media, who, by the way, I've never done Press TV, but I've done RT, and I know Press TV works the same way. They never control what you say. Right? They never say you got to say this about Iran. They never say you got to say this about Russia. They just want to get a Westerner's perspective. Right? They just want to hear what you have to say. So there's far less control in Press TV and RT than there is in the American corporate media. And this is what's wrong. This is the field of journalism in the United States. Good journalists get blackballed, whereas corrupt journalists with no spine get good paying jobs, get millions of dollars, and then use their platforms that they got by being corrupt to attack independent journalists and say, oh, these idiots, these misinformation spreaders, they don't work for corporate media like I, the enlightened journalist. No, you work for corporate media because you suck at being a journalist. Wyatt Reed doesn't because he's actually a good journalist, so he's been banned.
The Wisconsinite accent went out there with the ban. But
this issue makes me so freaking angry, man.
You know, Joseph Goebbels used to say that the greatest enemy of the state is the truth. And that is true as it was for the Nazi state. It's true for the American imperialist state. These people are allergic to truth. And what they're waging against Wyatt is an attack on journalism, but it's an attack on truth. Because that's what Wyatt stands for. He actually upholds the spirit of what journalism should be. Journalists should be the watchdogs of the elite. They should be the people digging in a hair-splitting manner through the narratives of the elite to see where they're lying and deceiving the people. But what the modern media is in the capitalist context are the lapdogs of the elite. So what you have is the lapdogs of the elite, the defenders of lying, the defenders of the system that has truth as its Achilles heel. Those people attacking a journalist that's actually promoting true narratives of the world. This has nothing to do with his reporting for Iran. This has nothing to do with whatever other reporting he's done for whatever other media. This has to do with the substance of his reporting. It is the fact that Wyatt Reed says the truth that angers the establishment, that angers the elite, and that sends the watchdogs of the elite on the horrible, horrendous smear campaigns that they have waged through an outlet owned by Bezos, which is one of the closest things you can get to a real life villain. I mean, just even his laugh is like a villain style laugh. Like you couldn't have painted it more perfect. Like he literally looks like a villain, He's got like one eye that's very villain-like, and then he laughs like a villain. So this is an assault on truth tellers, on people that have the cojones to speak truth to power. And Wyatt is one of them. Julian Assange is one of them, and many others. Scott Ritter is one of them. You know, we are there's a lot of us. There's more of us than the elite can deal with. And what they do in moments like this is get out censorship. Censorship is a product of the fact that hegemony is dwindling. If there wasn't a crisis of legitimacy, if people were just completely accepting what the elite would say and ignoring people like us, people like Gray Zone, you know, and everyone else who is in the dissident camp, if people are just ignoring us, there would be no need for censorship. It's the fact that people are listening. It's the fact that it's not just narratives that are challenging power, but actual potential material challenges of power that are conjoined to those narratives and truth-telling. That's why censorship comes out. And this is one in a slew of many other examples of the fact that the elite has completely lost the script and has had to explicitly use censorship to silence dissent.
Absolutely. Could move on to the Ritter one. There it is. I was posting a lot today. Oh, this one got good views.
Former UN weapons inspector and political commentator Scott Ritter has been forced off of his plane to Russia and had his passport confiscated. Ritter had been invited to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum where he was scheduled to give a speech. At this point, it's unknown if they had any kind of legal pretext for seizing the passport and kicking him off the plane. Ritter is a known critic of US and NATO policy in Ukraine, and he's many times been accused of being a Russian puppet despite being an independent actor. And he's also recently become a critic of US-backed Israeli policy, especially their recent bombardment of the Gaza Strip. So there are a lot of political reasons for them to want to kick him off this plane, but it remains to be seen if they actually had any legal reasons. I think this is a sign that the state is nervous and they're starting to crack down harder on dissent. Ritter talking about Ukraine was one thing, but now that he's criticizing Israel at a time when they're losing popularity with the American public, they have a lot of reason to want to shut him up, or at least to scare him a little bit by seizing his passport and kicking him off the plane. But I've met Scott, and something tells me he's not one to be intimidated. Former UN weapons inspector and political
It's crazy. I don't know what to say other than it's crazy. They seized his damn passport.
And a few weeks ago, they also did it to Ilan Pape, the famous, and it was in Detroit. He wasn't even like flying to Palestine or anything. It was in Detroit. They scanned his, they copied his phone, and they detained him for like 5 hours in Detroit. Ilan Pape, you know, famous Jewish anti-Zionist historian. He wrote the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, that details the Nakba and the horrendous things that were done to the Palestinian people. The ethnic cleansing, it's in the title. So that happened like 2 weeks ago, and now the Ritter thing. I mean, it's just disgusting. It shows on one side the weakness of the state, but also the power that it has to literally prevent someone from leaving the country to attend a conference just because it happens to be in Russia and because of his political views, which honestly, like what the development of Scott Ritter has been one of the most impressive things I've seen online, and it attests to, you know, the virtuous character that the virtuous disposition that is central to his character. Because at the beginning, in the first few days after October 7th, I remember he did an interview with Danny Haifong, and they kind of went at it as to like the legitimacy of the Zionist entity. Ritter was still in a position like, you know, it's a problem of the far right Netanyahu leadership, but he's been able to develop to the point of recognizing the fact that the Zionist entity as an entity has no right to exist. That what needs to take place is the right of return of the Palestinians, the establishment of a secular state with equal rights for all the people involved. And that's an impressive development, because we're not talking about like a 19-year-old just getting started in politics, moving very quickly through ideological developments. We're talking about someone who's probably in his 40s, And at that age, it's hard to undergo those developments, especially when you have a public persona that's so tied to what you've said before. So it's beautiful to see him, as the kids would say, become more based with time. And it attests to what Che Guevara used to say, like, if you're analyzing the world correctly, you're going to realize that reality is Marxist. And I don't think Scott is ever going to come out and say he's a Marxist. He just sees himself as an American patriot. But that attests to the fact that if you actually align yourselves with the values that America enunciates when it comes into the historical scene, those have so much homology with socialism and Marxism that if you're actually understanding the world correctly and not through this topsy-turvy ideological lens the bourgeoisie presents to you, you're going to end up in positions that consistently align you with communists. And I have a hell of a lot more in common with Ritter calling himself a non-communist but aligning politically and geopolitically on key issues with communists than I do with those people that call themselves communists but on key issues always make the same argument that the elite does for supporting the side of the establishment, but with a radical veneer.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Scott's the man. I have to ask, how did you end up becoming a Viking fan? I'm from Green Bay, so yeah, it's a stupid story. My dad, I guess it's not totally stupid, but my dad was his neighbor was a Viking. So my grandpa started rooting for the Vikings, and now we're all Vikings fans. And then, so I grew up in Iowa being a Viking fan, and that's why I have no issue being a communist, I think. I'm used to being surrounded by people who don't share my pro-Viking ideology, surrounded by Packer fans. I wasn't afraid to tell them the truth that the Vikings are the best team in the NFL. But yes, thank you. Thank you very much. One more that we missed. What do you think is America's character in relation to the West? And is America in essence a Western country for you guys?
This is such a good question.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a very philosophically rich question. Because there's clear ties to the West, but there's also something more and something more undefined about America as a civilizational project that's forming, that's still in a process of forming. You know, most of the states we talk about, Russia, China, like they're what Chinese scholars call civilizational states. They have civilizations drawing back thousands of years. We don't have that in America, and in many ways we don't necessarily start off as a blank slate, but there's so much potential. And what's interesting is that at the turn of the century, when the frontier actually closes, there's this whole fad in historiography rooted in trying to define what is it that makes America unique. And most historians, they came to the conclusion that it's precisely this absence of clear civilizational determination that makes us unique. What makes us unique is the fact that we're a unity of many, that we have people, that we have Chinese influence, that we have African influence, that we have various forms of European influence. Now, more and more, we have Latin American influences, like Texas just became, I think, the first state in the union that's primarily Hispanic. We have some native influence. There's so many influences that that the cultural life of America is based on. And as the American trajectory continues and we become more and more people, it's going to become evident how we're a people, a nation that contains within it a plurality of various communities that all interact with each other dialectically. And I think that process of community and civilizational formation, it is stifled by capitalism, because when the imperative is capital accumulation, you're stifling the basic development of the cultural life of the people. So I see socialism as the one thing that can allow for this process, this development of America becoming America, to fulfill itself, to get a clearer sense of what it means to be American. And it's going to be a very Heraclitean project, an understanding of the one that contains the many, and it's on our dollar bill. The slogan, "E pluribus," I don't know my my Latin, but the slogan on the dollar bill is the one that contains the many. I think that's what makes America unique. I don't think any other state can say something like that.
Right. You could almost say the states that resemble it the most are the civilization states of the East, like China and Russia. But all I would add to that, what you said was brilliant. We don't want to be some soft ass Europeans, so got to be our own thing. Oh, sorry, I clicked off of whatever you just said. So
This is what the slogan: "E pluribus unum." Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the question? Go back to it.
Ritter equals a hero. Google Biden chastises UN weapons inspector Ritter and watch the C-SPAN video. Oh, I don't know if I've seen that.
I haven't seen that either. You want to watch it?
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. I trust that L will not lead us astray.
My time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I envy your position. I sincerely do. I envy the ability to have such clarity on this issue. Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, the group you headed, anytime you were denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions
No,
of
I got
relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not.
I hate these people. I hate these people so bad. Just the bourgeois condescending attitude. It's above your pay grade. To the people who destroyed Iraq and brought ISIS back. To tell him that this is out of his pay grade. The only thing that rivals their stupidity is their arrogance and condescension.
Not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did,
and that's why Scott Ritter will be remembered as an American hero, and you'll be remembered as a genocidal war criminal who thought he was the man, even though he was a scumbag, Hitlerite piece of shit.
we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in. So what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision.
This is the most demonic sublation ever. From Jim Crow Joe to Genocide Joe.
Yes. I like what Slava says, too. Biden sounds like Trump here. He's playing tough. Yeah, and he's, what are the Democrats running on right now? Well, Biden's a decent man. He's a good and decent man. Trump is mean on Truth Social. We need a good and decent man. He's not a good and decent man. He's talking down to someone and calling him a piece of shit because he doesn't ride in limos, because Ritter's against the Iraq war and tried to say that Saddam never had weapons of mass destruction, which he was right about. And Biden's here being a bully, being a douche, being a rich asshole to Scott Ritter, who's right when Biden's completely wrong. And Scott Ritter would be vindicated by history, whereas Biden, is now known as one of the people who started the horrific war in Iraq that brought ISIS to power, and as one of the people who wrote the crime bill that filled our prisons with poor people and black people. But he still thinks Ritter's the dumb one and he's the smart one. But this is the good and decent man, right? This isn't the bully.
Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade. I yield for it.
Senator Warner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major, you've leveled one of the...
I wonder why Scott didn't respond. What a turd. That just made me mad.
Those $5 for 5 minutes of getting pissed off, wanting to beat Biden up.
Literally.
No, that's completely ridiculous. I hadn't seen that before. Thank you for sharing that, Al.
Yeah.
I think we've
by
covered
demonic creatures.
pretty much everything in the news cycle.
The one thing I want to say before we leave is make sure to join my class on how to make online propaganda. We're going to be specifically covering tools for making TikTok propaganda, but we're also going to be reading some of the articles Carlos has written about the way that imperialism is affected by social media and the way that the war of positions or the class struggle can be affected through social media. So it's available at the Midwestern Marx Publishing Press, the Midwestern Marx link tree. It's at the very top. If you just Google Midwestern Marx link tree, that'll come up. Take the class. We'll be reflecting on social media propaganda and what it means to create social media propaganda in the era of neoliberalism and what we call prophilicity, in this era where we all have these online profiles that we use to mediate the communication between us, and that we use and that we build up, right? We curate and build these online profiles, and that's a legitimate form of communication in the modern day. We can complain about it all we want and say, oh, these darn kids are always on their phones, but it's the reality. Kids are always on their phones. So how can we use that new form of technology to reach them with political education and a politics based in class struggle and anti-imperialism. So that's what we'll be talking about in this class. There will be concrete and practical tips on how to make TikToks and video content, but there will also be tips and tricks for other forms of social media if you don't use TikTok or if you want to get into TikTok. I know that's kind of niche, but you'll leave this class with the skills to start posting TikTok propaganda, even if you don't want to film yourself, even if you just want to make videos, make commentary videos, boost other people's content. I don't know. We're going to learn all of it. It's $15 for 6 weeks. And you also, like, if you're a fan of Midwestern Marx, you'll get to hang out with me and talk politics and just chill. I'll hang out after the classes and talk about whatever. And then I'm also going to bring in some other TikTok creators, like Dante Munoz is going to give like a little guest lecture. So I've got some TikTok friends with like hundreds of thousands of followers who you might be interested in talking to, who have agreed to come in the class and just share 10-15 minutes of what they've learned through creating TikTok propaganda and answer questions to the class. So a lot of stuff planned for this class. I'm very excited about it. I just finished the syllabus the other day. You get the syllabus when you buy it. Yeah, I'm really excited to meet some of you over Zoom and stuff too.
Bro, take the class, man. You're getting not just knowledge, you're also getting practical knowledge. You're getting skill sets that you're going to be able to use. So I'm going to be in the class just taking notes. I tried to endeavor a TikTok career, and I took a lot of notes from what Eddie told me I could do better. So I'm going to join, take my notes, and maybe I'll start doing TikToks again. But I would like all of you to not just learn the stuff, but do something with it. And social media is today a field of ideological warfare. So we have here the specialist, the first, the doctor of virality on Marxism on TikTok. So you're getting it from the best possible source. So don't make sure to lose an opportunity this good.
Yeah.
And it's only on for what, 6 weeks? So
6 weeks. Yep. And you can sign up until
$15.
next Wednesday.
$15 for 6 weeks. That's like giving Eddie a $2 popsicle a week for work, which is like, you can do that. You can definitely do that. So
definitely, it'll be worth it, I promise. And every week there will be homework. Obviously it's optional. I'm not gonna punish anybody if they don't do the homework, but obviously it's highly recommended. And you don't have to make your stuff public, but what I'm hoping is that you guys will start posting this homework TikTok, and you'll be willing to make it public, so then we can study it. So then we can take your analytics from week to week and look at them together and break down what we could all be doing good, doing better. It'll be good for me as well. And for me to kind of refine some of the tactics I've been using, and develop new tactics. So I'm excited for it. It should be fun. Yeah, even if you're not a big social media propagandist, we'll start from scratch. I'm going to teach you everything. So it should be a blast.
hell yeah.
Love it, Bad Wolf. Thank you.
The Titan of TikTok. That's a title I hope sticks. It is genuinely true. But with that, folks, this has been a beautiful evening. We've discussed a whole lot. We've had some heated moments, but it's been fun. It's been instructive, and hopefully insightful for the listeners. We'll sign off as we've been signing off as of recently with our beautiful Americanized, Fulkanized rendition of the International. Oh, if you're available this weekend, make sure to tune in to Eddie and Chris Alali. And Kyle, too, would be there, I think. Yep. Is Kyle still going?
Yep.
Yes. Eddie, Chris, and Kyle in Chicago, Sunday, 4 p.m. DM Slava Revolution Report to get the address so that the ops don't have the address and go shoot Eddie, Chris, Kyle, and everyone else. But thank you to everyone who watched, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the